Hey YouTube fans, Eric Hayden here, inside the house today. Just got back from our parents' house a couple days ago. Wanted to do an update on the cuttings. These are about 3.5 weeks old. Give you an update on them. Show how we haven't had a lot of success, and the reason for that is something that I want to change up. So we're going to talk about changing how I'm going to take cuttings in the future. Give an update on what did take, and then show you some of the cuttings that I took from my parents' garden in Maryland. So we were gone for a couple days, and for the most part, the cuttings were out under that tree. We showed you before, you can see some impatiens there and some geraniums. When we had our neighbors watering, I wanted to move them into full shade so I didn't have to worry about them getting scorched. But it gets a little bit of sun in the morning, very, very little, like 7:30 in the morning. Maybe a tiny bit of filtered sun after that, but then for the most part it's in full shade because of that big tree. So it seemed like a pretty good location, but we're quite warm here. Many nights are 78, 79 degrees for an overnight low. During the day, the ocean keeps us cooler. We're usually upper 80s, and it's quite humid. But I think it was just too hot in this closed container for the cuttings themselves. I got a lot of root rot, or not root rot, but the bottom of the stem rotted away, and usually that's too much moisture. And I think some of that was the fact that it was just so hot in the container itself. So with us going on vacation, I didn't want our neighbors to have to worry about misting these, so I brought them inside. And when I got back, I was pretty happy. It was a closed container. I had misted it before I left, but it looked just about like this. You could see a lot of the moisture on the inside. So I thought everything was okay. And I've taken cuttings in the past, varied success, sometimes outside, sometimes down in our old New York house, we had a basement, sometimes under growing lights. So I've done all different techniques. And I was pretty happy when I got back that these are some of the older ones. They still look really good. That's Double Delight. A couple of the Fortuniana look like they might take because they're not dying yet. But you can, of course, see some of these. And I'll get these out of here. I just wanted to leave them in to show you, how they looked. I'll kind of, so you can see that, dying from the top, but really the rooting or the bottom going rotten. I don't know how well you can see it, but no roots on it. So we'll get that out of there and throw it out. So I'll count it up, but I would say of the ones I took, it looks like 1, 2, maybe 3 of the Double Delights took. And of it looks like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 Fortuniana. Most failed except maybe 2. So 2 out of 11, and then 3 out of 6 or 7. So not that good of a take. So I need to change something up. I'm a little surprised. I mean, when it does this, it has rotted from the bottom. I'm a little surprised in the sense that we watered the soil and then we let it dry out for 24 hours, and I just missed it. So when I put my hand down in here, I mean, the soil is wet, but it's not sopping. So I wanted to try something different, and I noticed when I took the lid off, it was still quite hot in here. And doing some research online, everybody has a different technique, but of course you know that you're supposed to mist the leaves, and part of that is until they get roots, that's the only way they can take in water, and you don't want them drying out. But something I found even more interesting is the more leaf surface you have, and especially if the air temperature is above what the surface of the leaf temperature is, you can get more transpiration from the surface of the leaf. So bottom line, if you have a lot of leaves, and especially if it's hot, they're going to tend to dry out and not have as much of a take. And I'm curious if that's what happened. The reason why I say that, once we got back from vacation, I took some of these cuttings from my parents' garden. These have leaves. I cut most of the leaves off, or you can see here, if they were big leaves, I kind of cut them in half. So I have less leaf surface to work with, so less worried about transpiring that moisture out. These were also taken from my parents' garden, and due to some disease they had in the garden, they don't have any leaves on them. But I misted these about 8 hours ago, and you can see that they still have water on the leaf surface. So I'm optimistic that this method of having it in a controlled environment, it's about 75 in our house. I put it in a north-facing window. It gets a little bit of sun in the morning, but otherwise it's just bright, indirect light. I'm optimistic that we might have a better take this time around. The two reasons for that, it's only been a couple days, but these cuttings don't have any leaves, and you can see that they're actually starting to sprout out, from the cane itself. So that's a sign that it's healthy. And then number two, again, they look good. It's only been a couple days, but again, that leaf surface is still wet 8 hours later. I noticed when I had them outside that I would mist them 3 or 4 times a day, and every time I came back, they were dry on the leaf surface. So I think it was just a little too hot for them. An update on these, I don't see any of the roots as much as I did before. This is Double Delight. They're still looking good, so we'll keep an eye on that. These are ones that had some roots pushing out of the bottom, and you might be able to just barely be able to see the one right there. It's a little hard with the camera angle. So these look like they have rooted, so I'll probably remove these here pretty soon and transfer them over to a pot and get them out of the mist environment. So that's an update. Most have failed, but we're changing things, and we'll find out pretty quickly because it looks like I've got 7 new ones here and then another 4 there. So I had 11 new cuttings that we're going to try. I hope at least one of the Fortuniana took so I can start getting a mother plant going. And again, this is what unfortunately a lot of them have looked like at the bottom. So that's an update. We'll check back in a couple weeks. In the meantime, once they haven't taken, just get that out of there. But I wanted to leave it in so you could see what failure looks like for the cuttings. I hope everyone's doing well, and as always, I appreciate the new subscribers. Wanted to show you something before we wrap this video up. I did what you're not supposed to do, but I'm always curious to see how things are taking. You can see I've cleaned up where we were keeping the cuttings. Any old leaves, just throw those in the trash can, and it's a lot cleaner in there. Those are the cuttings we took from Maryland. Again, those are the newest ones, only a couple days old, and these are about 3.5 weeks old. Unfortunately, I did confirm most of my Fortuniana have been lost. The 2 that look good, I pulled them up just to look at them. That may ruin them. I was just curious. They were both callousing a little bit on the bottom, so optimistic that they certainly haven't rotted. So the difference was they were completely green all the way, not only to the soil line, but below. So we'll put those back in there. Hopefully they take. Same with these 2. These are a couple hybrid teas. Again, a little dying at the top, but all the way down to the surface of the soil and below, they were green. So that's optimistic. So those 2 haven't failed yet. They haven't succeeded yet, but they have some callousing on the bottom, so that's certainly good news. The ones I wanted to show you are the 2 that we saw roots coming out from the bottom after about 2 weeks, and I just slowly pulled these up, and if you give them a tug and they provide some resistance, that's a pretty good sign that you've got some roots, and check that out. So pretty darn cool. I'm going to put these in a pot. You can see I just lost some of the soil there now, but I just... I'm just doing this for practicing, so I'm kind of curious what things look like. And again, unlike the ones that failed, completely green all the way to the bottom, and I don't want to totally mess up this cutting. You can see the soil falling off, but I'll show you kind of maybe rinse these off and show you what they look like. But you can see a full rooted structure there, and then same thing with this other one. These are both Double Delight. You can see the roots on the bottom looking pretty good. So that's definitely exciting. While most did not take, you can certainly see the roots on those. And that's about 3.5 weeks. They took root after about 2, but pretty darn cool. I think what I'll do now is, since most of the roots or soil has fallen off, I'll wash these off and show you what they look like root-wise. And then we'll pot those up separately and move them probably outside to dry out a little bit because this soil is kind of wet. All right, this is what one of the Double Delight cuttings looks like with the dirt removed. And I just think this is the coolest thing. You shouldn't be messing with it that much, but how are you going to learn how things happen and why we do certain things? Why do we wound the bottom of the cutting? And I'll show you why. And again, this plant has a good root structure on it. It's not going to hurt it washing off a little bit of dirt. So if you look at the cutting, not... especially long one, it's green all the way to the bottom, but it's very interesting to see where the roots came out of. Notice how they're coming out of the side of the stem or the cane, And if you remember, that's where we wounded it. So if you look right down there, you can see the callousing. So that's what happens first, and then the roots come out of that. But those are all the wounds. So there's wounds on the side of it, and then of course we did some wounding on the other side. You can see that's where the majority of the roots have come from. On the real bottom, let me move some of these roots out of the way. On the bottom, there is some callousing, but not a lot of the roots are coming out of the bottom of the stem. There is some callousing that's going on, but very, very interesting. And again, that's why I like looking at these things. You can see a little bit of root there. You can see the callus there in the very bottom. But look at these long, long roots. They're all emanating from the side. So that's why when you root a cutting, you wound it on the sides. That's where you're getting a lot of your root growth. So very, very interesting. This is Double Delight. It's a nice rose. I'm gonna probably give this to a friend, a new gardener that's getting into roses, because it's always good to start with roses that are fragrant and grow well in the garden, because they're more apt to stick with rose growing if you start them off successfully. So that's it. Again, you can really see that callousing, and what I mean by the callousing right here on the side, that's where our roots are coming from. Quite interesting. And again, down here, it's kind of hard to see the camera, but this real long root is not coming out of the bottom. It's coming out of a wound on the side of that cane. So that's it. Success. Some of them, 2 at least, have rooted. And I saw the callousing on 2 of the Fortuniana. They was kind of at this stage where you had some callousing, so hopefully I get some roots off of that here shortly. Have a great day, everybody.